As Javier struggles to relate to Helene and even connect with her, he asks Ruby to do so in his place, and that allows not just Helene to open up, but also Ruby to somebody who she isn't employed by, or that is a co-worker. And as that happens, a couple visiting the island is treated as a warning for Elena in terms of what could come from her and Javier's relationship if they don't prepare for when the honeymoon stage is over. Going into the first topic, Dolly and Dutch have been together since they were 18, and that was 34 years ago. And since then, they've had 2 kids, they have a pet together, but they're kind of at this point where they're not sure if they want to spend their golden years together. They're starting to become empty nesters with the kids out of the house, and with Dutch accusing Dolly of siphoning $20,000 out of their joint account, and Dolly thinking Dutch is going to the gym to prepare or else to have an affair, they aren't really sure what's going on with each other. So their fantasy is to see whether or not they should stay together. And in order to grant this wish, Elena and the island, alongside Ruby, take their wedding rings and pretty much give them a clean slate. They act as if they're divorced, but they don't remember what each other looks like. So when they end up back together and marrying each other again after a quick engagement like the first time, that leads them to feel like they've been tricked. But the honest thing is, they don't communicate well, and after Elena puts them through a game show of how well you know your spouse, they realize that a lot of the issues that they think the other person has, or the things that the other person does just to piss them off, there's a deeper meaning there. The reason why Dutch does certain things like he wants to really keep Dolly close to him parties is not to keep her from embarrassing him, but because he gets very anxious around strangers and also social situations. The reason Dolly opens the window or does something else that wakes up Dutch in the middle of the night is because that's when her moments of dread and other issues come to mind, and she doesn't want to be up alone. And it's stuff like that that allows them to understand that because there was a breakdown in trust, which allowed for insecurities, that is why the relationship went to the direction they did. And in terms of the 20,000, that was because even though it seems Dutch forgot, Dolly's very much into poetry, and she wants to go into a retreat which costs that much money, which granted is a lot of money for a retreat, but what do I know? Now, as for why Dutch is going to the gym, he's having some type of cardiovascular issue, so that's why he's trying to get back in shape, or else in shape, so that it can help alleviate the problem. And with them both knowing the truth, it allows them to move forward together and in bliss. So the second topic deals with the series regulars in terms of Elena and Javier, and also Ruby being tasked with getting to know Helene a little bit. So starting with Elena and Javier, with all that is seen when it comes to Dolly and Dutch, Elena is trying to get out the way all the little eccentricities that she has and explain them up front so that when it comes down the line, Javier understands I do this because of that and that because of this. And because he doesn't fully know the context of why she's confessing all of this, he kind of laughs it off, but at the same time, he appreciates in a way that she is speaking future tense as of them staying together, getting married, and her wanting to prepare them for the long run. So with that, he lets it go. He doesn't ask any questions. He just tries his best to reassure her that he loves her regardless. Even though he doesn't specifically say he loves her, but that's coming down the road anyway. Now, getting to Ruby and Helene, Ruby tries to masquerade as a 20-something, but Helene pretty much figures her out quick enough, and with that, she is given the ability to kind of reconcile the 2 lives that she's had. This new life where she's this 20-something gets to start over, live life as a lesbian, and also acknowledge and appreciate the life she had as a 75-year-old woman who had multiple kids, a loving husband, and Helene appreciates both sides of this. When it comes to the grandma side, it helps her kind of understand Javier a bit more in terms of him trying as a father and him just trying being a major deal. And yes, he may not always know what to say, but just the fact that he keeps trying and he's starting to, and he'll eventually learn what to say, what to do, and be everything that perhaps Helene's looking for, that's what matters. And alongside that, because Helene is a young person and she wants to kind of get Ruby adjusted to this new life, she helps her understand what young people do. Whether it's the dialogue, whether it's how they interact with each other, she tries to make it so that when Ruby does eventually get back on the wagon in terms of dating, she'll be able to talk to people that are Helene's age or perhaps more appropriately a little bit older and not seem so awkward or not seem so clingy, for lack of a better way of putting it. So, final topic is pretty much a continuation of the second one, in which when it comes to Helene and Ruby, as they get to know each other and really bond, they get drunk. And this leads to Ruby throwing her wedding ring into the ocean, which perhaps Isla might have gotten because we see something plop in the ocean which looks like a mermaid, but again, we haven't figured out what the hell Isla is, Isla, whatever. So set that to the side. But what is something that is very much clear is that when Ruby and Helene were drinking, they decide to craft a drunk text to Gina. Gina, being who she is, she decides to contact Elena, who's hanging out with Javier. And those two decide it's time to pick up these two drunks on the beach. For Elena, the timing is okay because her and Javier have really bonded since Helene has been around. There's no issues with her being jealous or anything. If anything, she finds it attractive how much he's trying to be a dad, and even finds the whole idea of dating someone with a dad bod kind of hot, which is something she may talk about with Ruby at a later time, but right now she sees Ruby is still a little bit reeling from Gina, so she's presenting herself more so as a friend still. Now, as for Helene and Javier, he doesn't chastise her for drinking. He knows that she's still going through stuff since her mom died, and we also don't know, with it being about a year since Helene's mom died, Blue, what she's been doing or how she's been coping before she got to the island, so you can see he's trying to give her grace, and with him doing his best to, be the kind of dad she needs, he gives her this stuffed flamingo. When she's put into bed, he tucks her in, and whether it's sober thoughts and she's drunk or however you put it, or maybe just her trying, like Ruby says she perhaps should, she calls him dad, and with that he's very excited. He texts Elena, and it ends everything on a good note for him. So the first highlight is that Ruby has made a friend in Helene. And the reason why this is a very major thing to us is that in season 1 it was made very clear that as much as Ruby and Elena can be friends, their interests differ so vastly, and even their personalities, as much as they have learned to become friends and really be cordial with each other, there's still lines that perhaps can't really be crossed. Elena is not someone who's ready to always share things as much as Ruby is. Elena's not that girly, and while she has learned to appreciate some of that stuff, especially in terms of camaraderie and friendship, the activities may be something that she may only do when it just feels like it's something that she should do. Like when Ruby got dumped and she thought, this will probably make you happy. And I would add on to that, being that Elena met Ruby when she was a guest, has seen what she actually looks like, who she was, met her husband and everything, I think that has to be factored into the relationship. So with that all in mind, Ruby relying on her boss in order to really get to live this new life and experience it is not the best option. And of course, Javier is not really going to be much of an option either because he's wrapped up in Elena, and then Segundo either because he pretty much keeps himself and gardening and taking care of all the landscaping. So with Helene, there's an option here where, let's say Ruby and Elena have an issue, she has someone to vent to. And yes, Helene is Javier's daughter, and of course anything she may say could possibly get to Elena through him, but there's a hope that there can be a sort of trust where Ruby can have that kind of friend where she can let things go with and not have to worry about somebody else on the island hearing about it. Never mind, the main thing that Helene provides is it allows Ruby to kind of shake off this mindset of being a 75-year-old woman while still keeping all the memories and everything, but really getting to know and understand how she can experience this new life she's been given, either by learning how to talk to people who look her age, or simply put, maybe learning not to be so clingy when it comes to dating and even being in a relationship, and just learning how to be a bit more free, if not more independent. The second highlight to us is that Elena is trying to learn from the Paymer's mistakes and maybe even her own past mistakes in order to have something long-term with Javier. Now, we know that Elena has been engaged before, has dated before, but clearly something's different about Javier. Beyond her speaking in future tense, she also makes it seem like they could potentially be married and together for a long time. And I think that makes her nervous in a way that we haven't really seen before. She's exposing parts of herself that aren't cute or quirky, and she's more than willing to open up about her flaws and be vulnerable in ways that you've seen in the past make her very uncomfortable. Yet it seems in order for her to truly have a relationship that's long-lasting, she recognizes this is what's necessary. And it kind of makes you wonder, when it comes to her parents, or even family in general, has nobody really presented a positive example of what a relationship is, especially when you get to your 50s, 60s, and beyond? Hard to say, since while we were told about Elena's family member toward the end of the last season, that seems to be a long-term mystery that maybe they'll revisit sometime, but probably one of those once-a-season type of things instead of a story that develops from episode to episode, as we see with Javier and Elena's relationship. So the final highlight is just Helene coming to the point where she feels comfortable to call Javier dad, even if she was drunk at the time. Now, the reason why this is such a highlight for us is that while Javier has just discovered he has a daughter, you can't discount how much guilt is probably involved in him just learning this. From the way Helene talks, Blue was a single mom for most of her life, who potentially struggled but was a very good person. And meanwhile, Javier, for who knows how long, has been living in paradise. Never had to worry about a meal, a roof over his head, or nothing. And yet Helene, for the last year, who knows how she survived on her own. Whether it's the money from a life insurance policy, maybe living with friends and couch surfing. Who knows, because at this point, Helene is pretty much defined by her mother, kind of defined by her dad, and through her conversation with Ruby, you can tell that she's trying to balance having the stability of a parent while also the instability of trying to find yourself. But her journey is going to be a long one, and it seems with her finally getting some sense that, like Mel, Javier is somebody who's just trying to figure out what works, what doesn't, what are your needs, what are your wants, and how I can serve them. She's starting to get the kind of foundation she needs to become the person who she wants to be, or maybe even go on a journey to figure out what she doesn't want to be so that she can ultimately know who she is. But just her being able to rely on Javier when it comes to going on this journey, and even Ruby to a certain point, makes it seem that as much as she may seem like a character meant to further Ruby's storyline, or even Javier's storyline, she may also get her own benefit from being on this show, and that's going to be something very interesting to watch going forward. So overall, thus far, Fantasy Island continues to be able to balance its guest stars with its series regulars in a way that leaves you to wonder, with things going so well, will Ruby be broken up with be the worst thing that happens this season, or is it going to really bring on the drama as we get deeper into the season? And maybe even when it comes to that cousin or something that was mentioned toward the end of the last season, which I'm saying a lot of times, so my bad. I just wonder if that's going to be brought up, and that's going to maybe shake things up, because I feel like the island could potentially get out of whack a little bit, but we haven't seen that yet. But a part of me thinks it's going to happen sooner or later.